October 1954, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. 3:11 a.m. The kind of night where even the ocean holds its breath. A whistle cuts through the dark, short, sharp, like a razor slicing silence. Bumpy Johnson opens his eyes before the second echo fades. A man learns to wake fast in Harlem, but Alcatraz teaches faster. The concrete beneath his thin mattress is cold enough to numb bone. Somewhere in the lower block, a tray drops, clang, too loud for this hour. Not a mistake. A message. Bumpy sits up slow, breath steady, heart calm, because panic gets men killed in here. His fingers trace the edge of the steel bed frame. Something wedged underneath, folded paper. He unfolds it with careful hands. 6 words. Barely inked. Barely visible in moonlight. Tonight. Shower room. Alone. No guards. The handwriting isn't friendly, and whoever delivered it walked past 3 tiers of murderers to reach him. Either they were fearless, or protected. He reads it again. Same meaning. Same promise. Someone wants Bumpy isolated. They want him with wet hands, slippery floors, steam-hiding footsteps. A perfect place for a dull blade to do quiet work. He stares at the note. If he ignores it, he looks scared. If he goes, he walks into a pit. He chooses to go. Because Bumpy Johnson has never been a man who runs from shadows. The corridor hums with faint electricity. Salt wind from the bay slips through barred windows, sea mixed with rust and old sweat. A prison smell no man forgets. He moves through the darkness, steps measured. His mind, though, somewhere else entirely. Because this moment did not begin tonight. It began 3 years earlier in a Harlem alley where a deal went wrong, and a badge shined in the rain. But we'll get to that. For now, Bumpy walks toward the shower room. Open door. Flickering bulb. Water dripping one slow drop at a time, plink, 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 like a countdown. He steps inside. Chains rattle behind him. Gate shuts. Bumpy doesn't turn. Turning first means fear. Voice from the steam, Harlem's king finally bowing his head? Another voice, deeper, slower, Brooklyn accent thick like old asphalt. 15 years for one deal. Shame. Should have stayed in your lane, Johnson. Shadows move in the fog. 2 silhouettes. Then 3. Bumpy says nothing, but his eyes track every shape. Foot distance. Weak ankle. Knife bulge under towel. While they talk, he studies. Because words are cheap here. Steel isn't. You made enemies outside, the first man whispers. But you made bigger ones inside. This rock breaks every man. Even legends. Bumpy finally speaks, voice calm as a knife wrapped in velvet. Is that why you needed 3 men for one? Pause. Then laughter, short, nervous. One of them steps closer. Bumpy breathes slow, steady. His right hand flexes, a boxer's memory. Left foot slips back, ½ inch. Small move. This detail will matter soon, remember it? The blade flashes first, sloppy, confident. The kid thinks Bumpy will freeze. Instead, the Harlem boss moves like a man who has been waiting. He grabs the attacker's wrist, twists, bone cracks, snap. Blade drops. The other 2 charge. Feet splash water. Bumpy drives the broken wrist into the second man's throat. He buckles, gasping. Third tries to grab him from behind, cheap plan. Bumpy slams back, head to nose, crunch of cartilage, warm metallic taste of blood hanging in steam. All 3 on the ground now, coughing, groaning, silent as guilt. He kneels beside the one who brought the knife. Who sent you? The man doesn't answer. Bumpy presses harder. Who? Voice colder now. A whispered name escapes, one barely heard over dripping water. M. Mendoza. Bumpy freezes. Not from fear, from memory. Because he knows that name. A name tied to Harlem. To a heroin shipment. To the night he was arrested. And to the betrayal nobody knew about, not even Bumpy. But the real twist was still ahead. Bootsteps echo down the block, guards approaching. He stands, wipes blood from his knuckles with slow dignity. Because even surrounded by enemies, even in the coldest prison in America, Bumpy Johnson remains a king. He raises his hands when the guards arrive, calm like dawn. But as they cuff him, he looks back at the note. Soaked now. Ink smeared. One word still visible. Alone. He wasn't supposed to survive tonight. 3 years earlier, before the cold concrete of Alcatraz, before prisoner #1117 Harlem was loud. Not just in sound, in color, in smell, in heartbeat. Summer 1951. 125th Street alive like a living jazz record. Neon signs sweating light onto wet pavement, saxophones crying from second-floor windows, dice rattling in alleyways thick with cigar smoke and fried chicken grease. Bumpy Johnson walked through it all like a man who belonged to every corner. Tailored dark suit, crisp white shirt, tie knotted like he had all the time in the world. Hat tilted just enough to say he respected the streets, but never bowed to them. Kids on stoops stopped mid-argument. Barbers paused mid-fade. Men nodded. Women watched. "Morning, Mr. Johnson," a shop owner mumbled, tugging at his apron as Bumpy passed. Bumpy's fingers brushed a row of fresh newspapers stacked on a corner stand, headlines screaming about Korea, Truman, communism. The world worrying about distant wars, while Harlem fought quiet ones in alleys and basement rooms. He handed the kid at the stand $1 for a paper that cost a dime. "Keep the rest," Bumpy said. The boy's eyes lit up. Small gesture. This detail will matter soon, remember it? Because Harlem watched everything Bumpy did. And when a man like him fell, the whole neighborhood would feel the tremor. That night the air changed. The jazz from Small's Paradise sounded sharper, like the trumpet knew something bad was on its way. A distant siren wailed, then faded, then came back closer. Bumpy sat in the back of a dim restaurant on Lenox Avenue, a small table near the kitchen door. Smell of garlic, butter, frying meat. Ceiling fan turning slow, doing nothing for the July heat. Across from him sat Mendoza. Silk shirt, slick hair, pale fingers playing with a cigarette he never lit. His accent wasn't Harlem. It was ports and docks and long ship journeys, South America, Europe, shadows in between. Between them on the table rested a small brown package. No bigger than a loaf of bread. Wrapped plain. Taped clean. The kind of thing that could change 10 men's lives, or end them. "You expand with me," Mendoza said softly. "You control more than Harlem. Chicago maybe. Even the West Coast. Pure product. No cut. No competition." His voice was calm, but his eyes were too bright. Men who loved money that much never stopped at enough. Bumpy leaned back, chair creaking beneath his weight. He studied the package, then Mendoza, then the doorway. Behind him, plates clinked. Somewhere in the kitchen, a cook cursed as hot oil popped his hand. Smell of burnt garlic kissed the air. Bumpy's voice came low, steady. "I run Harlem," he said. "I don't need the world. Just my streets safe, my people fed, and my enemies respectful." Mendoza smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Respect," he repeated like the word tasted strange. "Respect comes from power, Mr. Johnson." "And power?" He tapped the package. "Power travels by ship." Bumpy's fingers touched the edge of the table. Just once, a quiet rhythm only he knew. An old habit from days before he wore suits. From days when he watched other men make choices that got them killed. He had a rule, no deal just for greed. No move that would drown Harlem in poison. Heroin was different. Darker. Too many kids already nodding off in stairwells, veins whispering secrets to the needle. Bumpy looked at the package again. If he refused, he risked making an enemy who had ships and soldiers in cities he didn't see. If he agreed, he risked something worse, Harlem turning on him. He didn't know one decision in this room would echo all the way to Alcatraz. But the real twist was still ahead. "Here's how it goes," Bumpy finally said. "We try a small shipment. 1. I control where it lands, who touches it, who breathes near it. Harlem will not become your trash can." Mendoza's smile widened. "Of course," he said. "You have my word." The lie slid across the table like a shadow. Outside, thunder rolled low, though the sky was clear. A bus roared past. The jazz from the club next door paused mid-song as if the band sensed something had shifted. They shook hands. Bumpy felt the man's palm, too soft, too dry. Not a street fighter. Not a man who bled for his promises. Later he would remember that handshake inside a small, white courtroom, and wonder if this was the exact second his future cracked. Weeks later, the docks smelled of salt, diesel, and rotten wood. Fog hugged the river like it was hiding something. Maybe it was. Bumpy stood with 2 of his men, coats pulled tight against the damp. Mendoza's crew unloaded crates, boots thudding on wet planks. A single streetlight flickered overhead, casting everyone in sickly yellow. Somewhere nearby, a seagull screamed, offended at the hour. "You sure about this?" one of Bumpy's men muttered. "This ain't like numbers. This sticks. Cops feel this." Bumpy didn't answer. Because inside he knew the man was right. Crate after crate moved. One of Mendoza's men dropped his end, wood cracked. A corner bent, something inside shifting. Time slowed. Bumpy heard it, the faintest rattle like glass against glass. He stepped forward. "Careful with that," he snapped. Mendoza grinned from the shadows. "Relax, Harlem," he said. You worry too much. Bumpy's eyes narrowed. That tone. That dismissal. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the river wind. Because somewhere beyond the fog, beyond the crates, beyond this one risky decision, a federal agent was already watching. Already taking notes. Already whispering his name into a file that would outlive the night. But we'll return to that moment later. For now, Bumpy Johnson walks away from the river believing he still controls the game. He doesn't know the game has already shifted. That the one heroin deal will be the only one they ever need to bury him. Winter came like a slap. By early 1952, Harlem felt colder than usual, not by weather but by eyes. Eyes watching from stoops. Eyes following men into alleys. Eyes that belonged to people who used to smile when Bumpy walked by. Word spreads fast in Harlem. Faster than jazz, faster than gossip, faster than bullets. One whispered rumor becomes a story in an hour. A story becomes truth by sundown. And the story was this. Bumpy Johnson brought heroin into Harlem. Not the whole truth, but truth was never needed to ruin a king. Only a seed. The same kid Bumpy tipped at the newspaper stand wouldn't meet his eyes anymore. Mothers pulled children closer when he passed. The sax player on 134th changed tune when Bumpy entered the club. Softer, suspicious, like mourning something still alive. Even his loyal men asked questions with their silence. In the back office of the Lenox restaurant, the same table where Mendoza proposed the deal, Bumpy sat with his closest circle. Glass of cognac untouched. Cigar burning slow between his fingers, smoke curling like a question. Tell me straight, he said. Street saying I poisoned my own people? His right-hand man Junebug shifted uncomfortably. Boss, folks talking. One shipment feels like the start of more. They scared. Bumpy's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping like it wanted to break free. I ain't feeding Harlem to no needle, he growled. We test one deal. Control it tight. Nobody touches unless I say so. Kids don't get it. Poor folk don't sniff it. Understand? Everyone nodded. But even in nods there are doubts. And Bumpy felt every one. He flicked ash, leaned forward, eyes sharp as a shiv. We keep it clean. We keep it quiet. If Mendoza tries to flood the streets without my word. He didn't finish. Because finishing would make a threat real and real threats become war. But we'll get to that war later. For now, Bumpy believed control was possible. He believed loyalty was strong enough. He believed Harlem would stand with him. Belief is dangerous. Then came the night at the Savoy. Big band playing loud enough to make bones vibrate. Women in shimmering dresses spinning like lights. Whiskey and perfume mixing sweet in the air. Bumpy walked in, crisp suit, hat low, presence heavy. But something was off. A table near the stage went silent as he passed. Another group looked away too fast. Laughter died the moment his shadow crossed the room. From the balcony, a detective watched. Cigarette glowing red in the dark. City badge tucked enough to hide, but not from Bumpy's eyes. Federal men never move alone. If one watches, three more listen. At the bar, Bumpy ordered a drink. Bartender's hands shook pouring it. You good? Bumpy asked quietly. The man swallowed. Feds was here this afternoon, he whispered. Asking who you meet with. Asking what you move. Asking about Mendoza. Bumpy's fingers tightened on the counter. He didn't show fear, only calculation. Fear is gasoline in the streets. Calculation is fire control. He sipped the drink, slow, thoughtful. Cognac burned warm. Metallic taste of danger lingered after. He left the bar with a decision burning like coal in his chest. Find Mendoza before the feds do. Because if Mendoza talked even one word, Bumpy wouldn't face a street war. He'd face the government. And nobody beats the government. The meeting came 2 weeks later in a back room of a shuttered pool hall. Rain hammered the roof like impatient knuckles. Lightning flashed, revealing Mendoza's pale grin across the table. You look worried, Mendoza said softly. I'm looking at a man who forgets agreements, Bumpy replied. Mendoza shrugged, casual like lives didn't matter. Harlem needs product. Word spreads. Demand grows. You want control? Impossible. Streets eat what they crave. He leaned closer, voice lower. You can be rich beyond kings. Why fight tide? Bumpy's eyes turned dark, deeper than river storms. I don't drown my people to buy a throne. Mendoza chuckled, wrong move. You think you're their savior? Harlem loves you now, sure. But when they're hungry, they'll bite you too. They always bite. Lightning cracked, white across Mendoza's face, exposing something cold behind his smile. Bumpy spoke with quiet threat. If one vial hits a child's vein without my say, You and I go to war. Mendoza's reply was one sentence, soft, chilling. War's already coming. You just don't see it yet. That line would echo in Bumpy's head for years. Even in a concrete cell surrounded by killers. Even on nights he dreamed of Harlem behind locked bars. Because days later, federal agents raided. Kicked down doors. Pulled crates. Flashed warrants with Bumpy's name underlined bold. Someone talked. Someone betrayed. And Bumpy didn't know who. Not yet. All he knew was this. The game shifted. And the next move wasn't his. But the real twist, the betrayal, the moment that turned Harlem's king into a prisoner on the rock? That part is still coming. 1952, U.S. Federal Court, Southern District of New York. Ceiling fans turned slow above polished wood and cold justice. No jazz here. No neon. Only the dry scrape of law against skin. Bumpy Johnson stood tall in a gray suit, wrists free for now. Reporters crowded the benches, pencils itching like knives. Federal prosecutor shuffling papers with a grin too eager. His attorney leaned close, whispering through clenched teeth. Bumpy, someone gave them everything. Shipping manifests. Doc photos. Names. Times. Bumpy's eyes didn't blink. I kept that circle small, he replied. Too small to hide a snake. But who? Junebug? One of the dock handlers? The bartender? Or Mendoza, smiling devil with clean shoes and dirty hands? He searched the courtroom for that slick hair, that silk shirt. He found him. Back row. Relaxed. Calm. Smiling. Not at Bumpy, at the prosecutor. And just like that, the betrayal Bumpy only feared became undeniable truth. Mendoza wasn't just a supplier. He was an informant. Protected. Useful. Disposable, but not yet. The prosecutor called witnesses. Crates were shown. Lab reports read like death sentences. This pure-grade heroin was traced to a shipment received under authority and protection of one Ellsworth Raymond Bumpy Johnson. Gas. Camera shutters. Cigar smoke rising from spectators like judgment. Bumpy didn't break. His shoulders stayed square, eyes forward, Harlem steel. When the judge finally spoke, the room held its breath. 15 years. Federal. Conspiracy to distribute narcotics. No cries. No shouts. Just a silence that stung worse than applause. Bumpy nodded once, like a king accepting exile. But inside something hardened. Not broken, forged. Because where most men fall, Bumpy begins. Alcatraz, 1954. 2 years into the sentence. Chains rattled as doors slid open. Prisoners marched single file. Guards watched with blank war faces. Rock Island, where the ocean didn't just surround you, it swallowed hope daily. Cell bars cold as winter steel. Mornings tasted like damp concrete and regret. Nights smelled like sweat, bleach, and the soft hum of waves crashing against limestone walls. Bumpy kept his routine military tight. Wake before dawn. Push-ups until lungs burned. Read law books. Write letters to Harlem. Watch. Listen. Memorize smells, footstep rhythms, guard patterns. He wasn't wasting time, he was studying the rock. Studying men. Studying himself. Because power doesn't vanish. It changes shape. Weeks after the shower ambush, the one he survived when he wasn't supposed to, whispers slithered through cell blocks. He walked out untouched. Mendoza's boys failed. Johnson got steel inside him. Respect grows strange in prison, watered by fear, rooted in violence. Men who never spoke his name now nodded as he passed. Others stayed out of his way like he carried plague. But one man didn't step aside. Big Red Malone, 6'4", shoulders like bricks, Irish Boston blood, prison legend for breaking a man's jaw with a tin tray. He approached Bumpy at lunch, clang of metal trays, overcooked stew smell thick in the air. You Harlem boys talk big, Red grunted. Rock breaks pride. Ask anyone. Bumpy looked up slow. Come. He stabbed a piece of bread with his fork, not fast, not slow. Controlled. Maybe you just never met the right Harlem boy, he replied. The room froze for half a second, long enough for loyalties to form, bets to be imagined, knives to shift in pockets. Red leaned close, breath sour with cafeteria coffee. You'll bend, he whispered. Everyone bends. Bumpy smiled, small, dangerous. I don't bend, he said. I teach bending. Red swung first, big mistake. Bumpy ducked under, tray clattering. 2 punches, precise. Third, solar plexus, breath gone. Red hit the floor like a dropped safe. Silence cracked. Then, a sound like wind changing direction. Respect. Men watched Bumpy not like a prisoner, but like someone who might walk out the gates one day without needing permission. That night, a guard slid something under his cell door. Not a knife. Not a threat. A book. Marcus Garvey's speeches. Leather-worn. Pages soft as confession. No note. No name. Just one line penciled inside the cover. A king without a crown is still a king. Bumpy sat on the edge of his cot, waves smashing against stone like memories. He read until the sun rose. And somewhere deep inside, a new vow tightened like a fist. If he ever walked out of Alcatraz alive, Harlem would never fall into another man's shadow again. Especially not Mendoza's. But the real turning point, the thing that changed Bumpy forever, wasn't the fight or the betrayal or the sentence. It was what he learned inside. Lessons whispered in mess halls. Secrets traded for cigarettes. A plan he began to build, piece by piece, invisible but unstoppable. A plan we're about to uncover. History remembers Alcatraz as a cage for monsters. What it rarely tells is how a man could build an empire inside it. 1957? Bumpy was 5 years into his sentence. Enough time for lesser men to crack. Enough time for him to sharpen. He walked the yard with a calmness that unsettled even guards, hands behind back, steps slow, eyes reading men like open books. The sea winds were cold and tasted like iron, gulls cried overhead like mourners. He noticed everything. Who traded cigarettes for protection. Who controlled the laundry. Who ran card tables. Who smuggled razor blades in Bible covers. And who needed power desperately enough to kneel for it. Inside this hell, Bumpy began to recognize something. Alcatraz wasn't a prison. It was a marketplace. And power was the only currency that never deflated. One afternoon in the library, dust thick, pages yellow, floor whispering under shoes, Bumpy watched a guard shove a thin, nervous inmate named Little Eddie. Skinny. Weak. Fresh blood. First-time offender. Shaking so hard the books rattled. Prisoners looked away. Guards loved fear. Fear kept order. But Bumpy stood. Come. Hands still in pockets. You push him again, he said quietly, and I'll teach you what Harlem teaches bullies. The guard froze, shock flashing across his face. No inmate talked like that. Not to a man with a baton and authority. For a moment, Bumpy's fate balanced like a coin midair. Then the guard smirked, leaning in close. You're brave, Johnson. Brave gets men dead on this island. Bumpy didn't blink. That's the difference, he replied. I ain't here to die. A stare. A silence thick enough to taste. And then, a laugh. Short. Uneasy. The guard walked away. Little Eddie looked at Bumpy with trembling gratitude, like he had just seen a miracle or a ghost. You didn't have to do that, Eddie whispered. Bumpy smiled slightly. Everyone needs someone once. Even kings. This detail will matter soon, remember it? Word spread through the blocks fast. Faster than contraband, faster than gossip. Bumpy stood up to a guard. And walked away breathing. Men approached him differently after that, not with fear alone but with possibility. Red Malone, healed from his lunchroom defeat, gave a nod one morning in the yard. Respect, not rivalry. In prison, respect is oxygen. Once it fills a man's lungs, others breathe it too. Soon inmates came to Bumpy with problems. Need protection? He'd ask. Need cigarettes? Need a message passed? Need peace between Irish and Italians before blood spills? He solved quietly. Not with knives, with words. With strategy. With mind. He became what few survive long enough to become in prison. The man who could make things happen. But real power needs infrastructure. Through Eddie he met others. A network grew, whispers traded for favors, favors traded for leverage. Laundry workers owed him. Kitchen boys owed him. A guard, the one who left him the Garvey book, gave him silent nods in hallways, a signal of alliance without words. And every advantage Bumpy stacked was a brick in a wall he would use later, outside the rock. Because while men wasted time playing cards or plotting escapes, Bumpy read everything he could about law, economy, history. Garvey. Dubois. Machiavelli. He copied quotes into a small notebook made of smuggled pages. Power isn't given. It's taken. Control the environment, control the outcome. Never start a war you are not prepared to finish. He wasn't preparing to survive Alcatraz. He was preparing to return and rule. But Harlem wasn't waiting idle. Outside the prison walls, Harlem changed like seasons. New players rose. Young wolves chased territory. Needles spread like sickness. Kids Bumpy once bought newspapers from now slept in doorways, veins whispering poison. Junebug tried to maintain order but lacked the iron shadow Bumpy carried. The streets respected him, but did not fear him. And in absence, a new king whispered promises in backrooms. Mendoza. He supplied cheap product. He gave credit with chains attached. He built loyalty not with respect, but with addiction. Harlem bet. Mothers wept. Churches buried sons. The neighborhood began to forget the sound of Bumpy's footsteps, but not the way they once felt safer when those footsteps echoed. A rumor would shift soon, unstoppable as tide. Bumpy coming home. Not yet. But soon. Inside Alcatraz, Bumpy stood at his cell window one night. Wind howled like old ghosts. The ocean below churned, relentless, unstoppable. He whispered to it like speaking to a living enemy. You ain't keeping me forever. And deep in his chest, a storm formed, quiet, dangerous. He wasn't coming out bitter. He was coming out prepared. More dangerous than ever. But fate was sharpening another blade, one not even Bumpy saw coming. A death. An offer. And a chance to return to Harlem months earlier than expected. The event that opened that door is the twist you're about to hear next. 1958, another winter. Colder. Meaner. The rock kept chewing through men like rust through metal. Some broke quietly. Some broke loud. Some were carried out under sheets. One morning, whispers rolled across the mess hall like a slow earthquake. Warden Blackwell died of a heart attack. A new interim warden would replace him, a political man, not a punisher. One who believed in reform, early releases, education programs, not just iron and concrete. Most inmates didn't care. A new warden didn't change the taste of chow or the bite of winter wind. But Bumpy felt the shift. When power changes hands, opportunities are born. And Bumpy Johnson always recognized a window, even if it was the size of a keyhole. Weeks later he was summoned. A guard came to his cell, no violence, no cuffs. Just a voice like gravel dragged across steel. Johnson. Warden wants you. Bumpy followed down silent corridors, echoing footsteps, fluorescent hum, scent of bleach and old sweat. He entered an office warm with pipe smoke and polished mahogany. A stark contrast to the gray world behind him. The new warden looked up. Ellsworth. No one used his real name in years. Not like that. Not with respect. You run half this place, the warden said plainly. Not on paper. But in reality. Bumpy's jaw remained stone. He neither confirmed nor denied. Power flourishes in silence. The warden continued. I believe in structure. Order. You maintain that better than my guards sometimes. It wasn't praise. It was calculation. He slid papers across the desk. Files stapled thick, edges worn. Petitions. Good behavior reports. Educational programs completed. Testimonies from multiple guards. One name stood out, small handwriting but bold meaning. Little Eddie. The boy Bumpy defended years ago. A short note attached. He saved me when no one else would. The warden steepled his fingers. Johnson, you're eligible for a conditional transfer to Leavenworth. Reduced security. Could shave years off your sentence. Air charged heavy, like Harlem thunder before rain. But if you accept, the warden added, you must leave violence behind. Completely. You become an example. Bumpy thought of Harlem, poisoned now. Kids without futures. Families torn. And Mendoza sitting on a stolen throne. Violence behind? How do you clean a street drowning in blood without bleeding a little? He answered carefully. I want out. Not to escape who I am, but to finish what I started. The warden studied him long. I believe you mean that. Paper signed. Hands shaken. A king without crown was stepping toward his throne again. Alcatraz cell block B, final night. Wind screamed outside like it knew someone important was leaving. Inmates pressed faces to bars as Bumpy walked the corridor, bag small, back straight, eyes forward. Some nodded with respect. Some with fear. Some with hope, as though his freedom meant theirs was possible too. Red Malone stood near the exit door, older now, slower. Not rival. Not enemy. Harlem needs you, he said simply. Bumpy paused, hand on gate. They locked eyes. I ain't coming back the same way I left. Red smirked. Good. Harlem changed too. Gate opened. Bumpy walked out. Ocean air hit like resurrection, cold, sharp, alive. For the first time in nearly a decade, the world wasn't behind bars. Harlem, fall 1963. Sunlight on brick. Street vendors yelling. Kids jumping rope. Taxi horns blaring like brass trumpets. Noise, beautiful noise. A black Cadillac rolled slow down Lenox Avenue. Windows tinted. Silence inside. But the moment the door opened, Harlem felt him. Men froze mid-dice throw. Old women crossed themselves. Someone whispered like speaking a prophecy. Bumpy's home. He stepped out wearing a dark coat, fresh hat, shoes polished enough to shame mirrors. Not loud. Not flashy. Just presence, heavy as legacy. People gathered like tide returning to shore. Handshakes. Hugs. Tears hidden behind pride. Even children who never met him stared with curiosity, as though sensing story in his shadow. But beneath all the warmth, another presence lingered. Heroin. Needles. Corner spots controlled by strange faces. And whispered name after whispered name pointed to one man. Mendoza. The traitor. The snake. Now calling himself the boss of Harlem. Bumpy stood on the corner he once ruled, breathing in the city's scent, fried food, exhaust, perfume, danger. He wasn't the same man who left. He returned sharper. Calmer. More dangerous because he could wait. A voice beside him, familiar. Junebug. You ready to take it back? He asked. Bumpy's eyes narrowed at a group of Mendoza's boys on the opposite corner. Slick suits, cheap bravado. He took a breath deep enough to fill the street. No rush, he said. Let them think the throne is theirs. He smiled, slow, knowing, lethal. A king who returns quietly is the most feared kind. The war hadn't begun, not yet. But Harlem felt it coming. Like thunder hidden beyond the horizon. Like a blade being sharpened behind a closed door. And somewhere in a smoky backroom Mendoza heard the news. Bumpy Johnson was home. He laughed at first. Then he drank. Then he didn't sleep. Because he knew what every man in Harlem was whispering that night. You can replace a king when he's gone. But when he returns you better pray he forgives. And Bumpy Johnson was never a man known for forgiveness. And if you think this was calm, wait till you hear what happened when Bumpy met Mendoza face to face in a Harlem nightclub with hundreds watching. Bumpy Johnson walked back into Harlem not as an ex-con, but as a man forged in iron and ocean storms. A king returning to his kingdom. And the city held its breath. If you enjoyed this story, comment your thoughts and subscribe because the next chapter of Harlem's King is coming soon, and trust me, that one gets bloody.